Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alim al hakim. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I've just consulted with Asar about timings, and I understand that Maghrib comes in at 3:15. So perhaps what we do, it's about 2 o'clock now. If we were to go through till 3:10, and then we take a break for 20 minutes to include Maghrib, and then we went from 3:30 to 4:15, that would be the final session. So we have one longer session now and a shorter session after Maghrib. And in the last session, I'd like to just concentrate on questions. And I already have 4 kind of quite heavy questions. So this would probably be the last session on the text, and then the last bit would be questions. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
Okay. Right, can I ask you then to turn to the second page on your list, on your worksheet, and it should say Activity 3, what is education? And on the 4 sides you have the word Tarbiyah, Ta'deeb, Ta'leem and Riyada, and I just want you to draw a line to the equivalent translation or explanation on the other side. So just simply draw a line across. Okay. Okay, Tarbiyah, which one have you put for that?
All of them.
All of them?
Yes, one of them.
Okay, which one do you think, if you have to choose one of the 4, which of the 4 would be the most close translation?
Second line.
Growing, caring, nurturing, developing. Yeah, that's what I would put. Ta'deeb?
Third line.
Training, discipline, manners. Yep. Go ahead. Ta'aleem? The last one, knowledge. And Riyada? First one. Excellent. That's what I would have done as well. Right, what I'm going to do is... Okay. I think, as the brother said, they kind of cross over. I've got one last question. The organisation that you have here, what's its actual title? Moonlight. Crescent. Moonlight. Crescent. Okay. Moonlight. Excellent. That's really cool. So this organisation is called Moonlight. All right. That reminds me of an organisation in Wolverhampton called Greenlight. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, if I were to call it, if you were to put one of these words into your title, Tarbiyah, Ta'deeb, Ta'leem or Riyada, which would you prefer? Like if, for example, it was going to be called Madrasa. So would you call it Madrasa to Tarbiyah, Madrasa to Ta'deeb, Madrasa to Ta'leem, or Madrasa to Riyada? Which would you, out of those 4 words, which would you use to describe the organisation that you have, the school that you have? Tarbiyah.
Riyadh.
You like riyada.
I would say tarbiyah and ta'lim.
Tarbiyah and ta'lim. Madrasa to tarbiyah wa ta'lim. That sounds good. Because it's like developing and teaching. So there's like development. Sorry?
And discipline. All the points you mentioned before.
But- Yeah. They all interchange. Yeah. But the reason why I wanted to look at that was just to see how do people look at education, because some people think madrasa is just for teaching or just for... No. But inshallah, maybe another time we can look at that in more detail. Right, as I said, I'd like to look at page 31. وأول الأشياء هي الحضانة لأنه مع أهله أمانة. The first stage is al-hadana. And hadana comes from the word hidan, which is the wing of a bird. It's called a hidan. And the reason why is because when the bird looks after its eggs, one of the ways it keeps the female bird keeps the eggs warm is by spreading its wings over them to protect as much of it as possible. Also, literally, hidan is the side. The hidan is the sides of the body. So this is your hidan. So the hadana is that which you keep close to you. So the idea of the hadana, which is usually translated in English into nursery, the hadana is actually where you keep your children close. And that's an interesting concept about keeping close. Now, I remember one of my very first teaching experiences. I was in a hadana, in a nursery. In fact, I had many stories to tell about that, but I'd limit it to one or two today. And one of the first things was that we used to analyse, and still do, use pictures to analyse what's going on with a child. And especially those children who have gone through traumatic experiences. Art therapy is a major part of the work that we do with children. So I remember this very first experience of asking the kids to draw their parents. Well, I didn't, somebody else did, I was just observing it. And one child just drew her mum with no arms. They drew the child with no arms. And it stood out that it was a really good drawing, but she just forgot the arms. And it still sticks in my mind. Why did that child not draw their mother with arms? And I never got to grips with it. I was 17 or 18 years old, just thrown into teacher training, first experience, and then I have to think about this. And I never really worked out what it was. But people have talked about it since then, even on my course. Somebody said, what do you think? Why would a child not... A perfect drawing of their mother, but with no arms. The first thing is, did the mother have arms? That was actually what somebody says, well, maybe his mother just doesn't have any arms. And I says, well, no, I don't think that's the case.
She didn't hug him and touch him.
It might be. That was a really strange... The child had no affection. The child really found it difficult to show affection. And the mother never appeared on the scene at any time. I was there for maybe 3 months, and there was never a mother. I don't know, but that child certainly had problems. And the thing that struck me first was this picture. So, whenever I think of the hadana, I often think of that child not having a mother that's had any affection. So the أول شيء هي الحضانة لأنه مع أهله أمانة. Because with the ahl, the family, this hadana stage is an amana. Now, what does amana mean in English? A trust? A trust. That's a good word. Trust is a really good word because it has so many meanings in English. It means so much to say, I trust you, or I put this under your trust. An obligation is one of the meanings, but what's meant by amana is if I give you something and I say, deliver this to your brother, okay, then your responsibility is that you now have to go back to Copenhagen and you have to find your brother and then deliver the pen to him. And while you are holding the pen, it's your responsibility. But once you've given it to him, it's finished. It's a limited period from when I give it to you to when you deliver it. And that's the period that you have. Now you think about it. The children are an amana. They don't belong to you. Your kids do not belong to you. And that's what we have to remember. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. They belong to Allah, and to them they will return. They're only with you for a short time. And anyone who's seen their kids grow up, they'll know exactly what that means, because there's a point where they're on their own. They're no longer yours. They're grown up. And now you should enjoy your kids while you can, because in 20 years' time, you don't know where they're going to be. So this hadana period is an amana for you, but also when you go back to choosing the wife or the husband, you need to think, who do I trust as an amana to fulfill this amana? I need to choose somebody in my life who, for this period of time, I can trust sufficiently to put my children in their hadana. And that question is a really scary question. And likewise, it's the same question that comes up. What kind of school should I put my kids in? Should I put them in a Muslim school? Or should I put them in a state school? Should I put them in a private school? Should I put them in a public school? Should I homeschool them? Should I homeschool them with a group? All of these questions I don't have the answer for, except you should remember that these kids are an amana, and you're going to be asked about them. كلكم راع وكل راع مسؤول عن رعيته. Every single one of you have been given a responsibility in this world to look after as a shepherd over those people, those that you're responsible for. So you have kids, and those kids are your responsibility. Yawm al-Qiyamah, you're going to be asked about them. You're going to be asked, how did you bring them into the world? Did you think about it? Did you choose the right person to bring them into the world with? Who did you allow them to play with? I thought one of the words that we did, I don't think we did get to writing it, I think we might have done. Mutual companionship, musahaba, is a really key word, because it's about who do you allow your kids to play with? And that's a question that each person has to answer. What are your neighbours like? What are your neighbours like? Would you let your kids play with your neighbours? Do you want to keep them to yourself? Anyway, that's the first line of the... Charlotte, we could talk about that line for the whole session. فَيَنْبَغِي إِرْضَاءُ كُلُّ طِفْلِ صَالِحَةً بِقَوْلِهَا وَالْفِعْلِ. And that it's appropriate that the feeding of every child is from somebody who's salihatan, is righteous. بِقَوْلِهَا, in her words, وَالْفِعْلِ, and in her actions. تَأْكُلُ الْحَلَالِ, that she eats halal. لا من الحرام. فالطبع قالوا تابع الطعام, because the way that the child eats will influence their character. As we say in English, you are what you eat. So if you eat from the haram, then you will grow up in that kind of life. Whereas if you ensure that the children only eat halal from the beginning to the end, then that period of hadana is the period of the real tarbiyah, the key period of tarbiyah. أول شيء الحضانة. أول شيء الحضانة. Now, somebody was asking yesterday about women. There was a kind of, not an argument in the car, but a discussion about traditional values. And the question was about women. And somebody asked a question, how come, in effect what it was, how come women don't have any status? It wasn't quite put like that, but that's the kind of tone it was. How come women don't have any status? Meaning, you don't get women sheikhs, and you don't get women this, and you don't get women that, and it's kind of, and it was talking about a particular culture where women don't seem to have a great deal of importance. And I just pointed out, actually, among our teachers, the women have a massive status. When I was the person was introduced at the beginning, not much of it I recognised as being me. But one thing I did recognise was the name of my teacher, Al-Habib Ahmed Mashhur bin Al-Haddad. May Allah show him mercy. And he was a phenomenal scholar. I mean, I could talk for hours about this scholar. But he had, in his generation, in the late 20th century, from 1930 to 1995, that period, I don't think anybody on this planet was responsible for more people embracing Islam than him. We're talking of hundreds of thousands of people. Whole villages, whole tribes in Africa became Muslim through his dawah. He was a phenomenal scholar, and he was an amazing man. And when people, I know people. When I was in Jordan once, I was just in a house once, and I could hear them talking behind. He actually saw Habib Ahmed Mashur. Him over there. He saw him with his own eyes, and that's how much respect, because he became almost a legend. And Habib Ahmed was a phenomenal scholar. And we were just talking about what was he like as a child, and his first real teacher was his mother. So much so that when he hears anybody called Sophia, he smiles, because his mother, that reminds him of his first teacher, Hababa Sophia. And she used to feed him as a child with Quran. So she would literally, as soon as she would be put on the breast, and she'd begin with Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. And when she'd finished feeding, she'd stop that khitmah. She'd stop reciting Quran until the next time she feeds him. And then she'll carry on from exactly the same point she finished until he stopped feeding. So every feed, from the very first time he ate, he was having Quran recited to him. So you can imagine how as soon as he could speak, he was speaking Quran. He didn't need to memorize Quran. It was he just had it with his milk. So this is what we call awwal shay al-hadana. Now, his father and uncle, who were responsible for making decisions about this child to be born, they chose Hababa Sophia because they knew this was the kind of woman that was going to be the mother of Habib Ahmed Mashur. So this is what's meant awwal shay al-hadana. And you need to choose somebody who's going to be like that. But likewise, you can't always choose everybody that's going to influence your child. Can you? Because if you allow the child to go outside of the hadana, you extend it to a wider and wider kind of hadana. The group that hugs the child or looks after the child becomes bigger and bigger. And do you start to control it so that nobody comes close to my child, except those who have been vetted and checked for halalness? And does that mean only those that pray? Because that's what it's kind of implying here. I don't know, has anyone got any comments or thoughts about that? Please.
I mean, you can't control, of course, but you can influence it a great deal. For example, I have a teenage daughter who's 13. She goes to a Swedish school. There are no Muslims. But I check every single one of her friends, because my child has allergies, so she can't go to them. So what I do, I invite them from the beginning. I invite every child all the time. And I check. And I don't say to my daughter, she's a bad girl, or don't do it. We go through it, and I think, do you think like this? So she makes a decision. I don't cut her from her friends. And there was once a girl who stole from our car things that belonged to Selma. And I said to her, you have to be sure she did. She said, I said, we test her. These marbles, we put them in the car, and we knew she stole them. Second time we were sure, because I put them myself. And so when it was her birthday, we bought her lots of these marbles. They are very cheap, so we bought her so much. But I didn't tell my daughter not to go with her, but we talked about stealing, what happens if you're with a person who steals, what. So she makes a decision, and not. So you can control it.
Okay.
To an extent.
Any other comments any thoughts about that? Sounds a bit controlling to me, not with no disrespect, yeah? Would you let your child eat with your... Okay, a situation here. A child in the house, and the neighbour is Jewish. And the child, the gardens are almost shared. There's just like kind of a piece of wood going between the two gardens. And the young boy is 2 years old. He goes in and out of the gardens. The doors are open and he wanders into the neighbour's house. And the neighbour is a really nice lady, and she offers him some food. Would you be happy with that?
I would let the neighbors have a good relationship with my daughter, because I know we are allowed to eat the
Oh, okay, so the fact that she's Jewish doesn't scare you at all?
No, it doesn't. And I think I'd like my child to, because she lives in a multicultural society, I would like my child to feel that she fits. She knows who she is, but she knows who the others.
Okay.
She knows.
Any other thoughts? Please.
We have neighbors who are children of same age, and they're Christian and Muslims, but we're like family. And my child is 4 years old, and we don't always agree on their choices, but we let our children play with them. And
Okay, I'm actually thinking more of the food here, because the lines are about that if they eat the halal, they'll live a halal life. If they eat the haram, they could end up in a... So, please.
I was thinking, distinctions between, Islam and other religions. We have, unfortunately, people among us who are Muslims, but not acting as Muslims.
Okay.
In that sense, you understand what I mean? Like for us, for instance, living in Sweden, having a lot of Swedish friends and Swedish companions treating us really good and respecting us for being Muslims. Where's the distinction between having to make a choice between letting your kid play with a Swedish, maybe Christian or atheist, who's a good kid?
This actual family didn't have any children, by the way.
Okay.
The child just wandered in, and the mother of the lady of the house just offered the children.
I think it's like brother said, but I just want to add, it's very important in Sweden that, or in Western European countries, that to teach our kids from the beginning that on his own he have to
Make
even the
decisions.
candies,
Yeah.
like you said, you have to teach him when she or he is very young that what's the haram thing and what Allah loves, what Allah hates, So when he is very confident on it, then even by his own, when he go to a friend, for example, he knows that this kind of food he's not allowed to eat it. This kind of candies he's not allowed to eat it. So he can put.
So you both kind of would be happy. It sounds, both of you, that to encourage them to kind of wander into the neighbours and eat from their.
But we have to have.
But you give them critical and.
Like sister said, we have to know who is the person.
Okay, so
They have
the
good
key thing would be.
manner, yeah.
So you don't have, in principle, you don't have a problem, but you'd want to check them out a little bit. Okay, to the extent that the sister wants to check them out.
No, but,
Which you have, it's your right. It's your right,
Yeah.
because we said, "Qu anfusikum ahlikum nar." You will be asked about your kids, not me. I'm not going to be asked about how you do. So this is the way you're dealing with it, and that it's your.
Until she's
Yeah.
18. After that, I have no, and I agree with the brother here.
Okay.
I teach her when she was young. This is what we don't eat. When we go to people, we don't eat this meat. We don't eat. So she knows herself. She herself, even in the school, if they give her certain things, she says, "No, I don't eat that." The school knows that she's a Muslim
okay,
girl. Her friends knows that she's a Muslim girl.
Yeah.
So she already knows all this information. So, but still, I have to have guidance on her. I can't just let her. Be
Okay.
out of control.
All right. Good. Do you want to add
yeah,
something?
I was thinking that my daughter is like almost 5, and I can teach her like that she can't eat that or she can't eat that, but she's 5, she doesn't have critical thinking. So I think maybe if my kid were to go to the neighbors, it's more that, what kind of relationship do I have with the neighbor?
Yeah.
Is it a complete stranger, or is it someone that I know? And I was raised in Sweden, and I know that my Swedish friends, they know that I don't eat pork, and I never told them that they couldn't eat pork. But when they hung out with me or I lived with them, then they just stopped buying it. I respect that Sabine won't eat the food if we have pork in the fridge. So I think it's about that thing, how does the neighbor understand?
Okay.
What
So
kind of communication
so
we
me
have.
throwing in this thing that she's Jewish is just kind of a red herring to make you all upset. Yeah. It's not really that important. It's how good.
How the relationship is.
I'm glad you said that, because this is actually a situation I'm describing of my own children. And my son was 2 years old, and he walked in and out of my neighbour's house, and I didn't have a problem, because I knew the lady next door would never, and she actually once came to us and says, "Are these biscuits okay? I'm not quite sure." And I knew how careful she was, to the extent that I actually felt more comfortable with her going into the Jewish neighbour's house than a lot of the Muslim friends that are kind of in the neighbourhood, because I knew that she had some care, to the extent that actually when we moved out, she wrote to the house where we'd rented to say, could they find Abdulaziz wherever we've moved to, because she wants to sell her house to me, because she wants her house to stay pure after she's gone, and when she dies she'd like me to buy her house. I don't know, some strange neighbours I've had in the past.
Did you buy that?
No, I didn't. But I went to visit her to say thank you very much, and I'll do whatever I can to ever look after her when she does get old, which I did kind of do for a few years. But those neighbours I cared a great deal about. And this question about Hadana and making these choices are really important choices that everybody has to make. And you need to equip people. When you're talking about tarbiyah, you need to equip parents with the ability to think, what decisions, how am I going to make these decisions? Because in the end, there is no answer. You have to answer it yourself, because you're responsible, not me. You know, you have to be responsible for how you deal with your kids and your neighbours and the kids' friends. But the principle that's being made in this point is فَتَأْكُلُ الْحَلَالِ لَا مِنَ الْحَرَامِ فَالطَّابِعْ قَالُوا تَابِعْ لِطَعَامِ that it will naturally be, if you give the child halal food and grow up in a good environment, that the child will develop likewise. إذا خبث الرضاعه مال إلى فعل الخبيث آخرا وأولا. He says, and if you give them bad things to eat, this will affect their character. وبعد ما يؤذم تجده يشتهي أكل الطعام دائما لا ينتهي. He says that, and after that, what will happen is that the child will start to. Did I miss out something? Okay. After this, the child will start to eat a great deal, always, and he will never be satisfied. Why the Imam is talking about this is that Imam al-Ghazali, on which the whole book is based, he says that the first thing that a child needs to learn is to say Bismillah and eat with his right hand. The first thing a child needs to learn is not any philosophical thing. It's to eat with their right hand and to say Bismillah. And the reason why is, when we talk about development and the development of a child, the stages that a child goes through, the first stage that a child goes through is being born. They come out of their mother, and what's the first thing they do? Cry. The first thing they do is they cry. Why? Because Shaitan does what? Whispers in their ear. Is that right? Stabs them. He pokes them. Shaitan pokes the child. That's what the hadith states. The child gets poked except for two. Sayyidatuna Maryam and her son. These are the only two that weren't poked by Shaitan. So Shaitan affects the child from the beginning. Okay, well, we'll kind of leave that for the minute, because there's a whole kind of discussion there which we don't have time for. But what do they do after that? They don't just have milk. How does it happen? Let's break it down. There's things that happen. Oh, by the way, can I just order some milk, please? Yeah, I'll text it through, shall I? What's the first thing the child does? Cries, looks up, opens his or her eyes, and opens the mouth. Because what the child needs is food, is nourishment. The first thing the child wants is nourishment. And it doesn't think, actually, I think I fancy some milk now. It doesn't happen like that. Intellectually, it's instinctive that the child needs to eat. And the child looks up. The first thing it does, looks up and opens the mouth. And this is the first stage of development. It's all 100% physical. And it's all based around the basic need of eating. And once the child has eaten, what does the child do next? Burps. And then, what's that word you taught me earlier in Swedish? That cows do? Yussel. And then he does yussel. He doesn't think, oh, I think now is the time to for a bit of yussel. He doesn't think that, does he? It just happens. Because in this early stage, it's all physical. There's nothing to do with the intellect. It's just physical. And so the first thing the child needs to learn is how to deal with physical needs. And that's why the first thing you teach a child is to eat with their right hand and say Bismillah. Because it's not about the intellect. It's about learning how to deal with physical needs. So the next thing it talks about is adab, of eating. Because this is all about dealing with that first stage. Once it moves from that physical stage of meeting physical needs and eating, then it can start to move into the intellectual stage, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay, I've just given you a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that you should عن عمر بن أبي سلمة رضي الله عنهما قال كنت غلاما في حجر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So Umar ibn Abi Salma is the stepson of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So he's growing up in the house of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. And he says كنت غلاما في حجر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فكانت يدي تيش في صحفة. So my hand used to just wander around the plate. I used to eat from wherever I wished. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا غلام سم الله تعالى وكل يمينك وكل مما يليك. He says, eat, say Bismillah, eat with your right hand and eat from that which is in front of you. So this is the first thing that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches him. So the first thing that you should be focusing on as a parent is to make sure that they get the adab of eating from the very, very, very first moment. And that first moment is critical, is because when a child looks up and sees the rahmah of the person that's looking down at them, that bond is already started. Which is why it's important that those first moments are treasured and that you think about who is there, what do they experience, what's that first experience like for the child. Right, I've got a quick task for you. Okay, that's how you start your learning, is that they start to eat. And you need to teach them the adab of eating. I know this group over there is like a spiritual, they're into this kind of spiritual stuff, and they're thinking, he's rather kind of boring and practical. Let me give you some of the spirituality behind this. The child is looking for rizq. He's looking for rizq. He doesn't think, oh, there's a creator that has just created me, and I need to find the rizq that has been provided for me. The child knows there is Allah. The child knows that there is a raziq. Why? Because the child has just come from what we call the barzakh. What's the barzakh? The interrealm between this world and the next world. The child was, your onboard children, where are they at the moment? In there somewhere. Allah's just waiting to bring them into this world, and He's waiting for the asbab for them to happen. And once they come into the world, then they'll be in this dunya. And that's the reason they cry. It's because if they're happy where they are now, And then they get put in there, in this really, really nice, warm kind of place where they just they have this umbilical cord to their mother, and the food just comes straight in, and they just kind of grow, and then they're hearing Quran, and they've studied the Book of Assistance and a bit of Beethoven thrown in there. It's like really cool. And then all of a sudden they come out, and it's a freezing cold morning in Gothenburg, and it's raining and miserable. And all of a sudden they've got no food because their umbilical cord's just been cut, and it's now like a belly button. Wouldn't you cry? What would you want? You'd want Allah to provide you with rizq. So you look up, Ya Allah! And what do you see? Mama. Huh? And then she says, Bismillah. And the first association with this food is it's in the name of Allah. So the first association of rizq coming from Allah is by looking up at their mother and taking this food. Bismillah, in the name of Allah. So the process of knowing Allah comes from eating. And that's why it's so important. The first thing you should teach your child is to say Bismillah. They don't need to intellectualize it. Why? Because they know better than you do. But they haven't learnt the adab of eating. Why? Because they used to get fed through an umbilical cord. And it's only now that they're getting used to the adab of eating. That's why you need to give them ta'deeb, is to teach them, eat with your right hand. What if you're left-handed?
Eat with the right.
Eat with your right hand. What if you write with your left hand?
Try although with the right.
No, don't worry about it. Just write with your left hand, no problem. If
No,
my-
not right. I mean eat.
Eat with your right hand, write with your left hand. Why? Umar ibn Khattab was left-handed. Umar ibn Khattab was left-handed. And when he used to write like this. Yeah? There's two ways. You see people who are left-handed. Some write like this, and some write like this. And Umar ibn Khattab used to write like that. So if he wrote like that, the Prophet sallallahu he didn't say any of that, did he? But when it came to eating, he says, eat with your right hand. So Umar ibn Khattab ate with his right hand and wrote with his left hand. No problem in that. Okay, la ba's, as he says. Okay, so this is the important adab. Why eat with your right hand? Because shaitan eats with his left hand. And what shaitan wants to do, according to At-Taybi, is there's a hadith where he quotes the reason why shaitan eats with his left hand, and he wants his people to eat with their left hands. So he encourages them to forget the importance of the right hand. So you have to remind your children, eat with your right hand. So this is part of the adab. Right, I'm going to see who can list the adab of eating in 2 minutes. Who can come up with the most? Just list them, write them down. Right, starting. You got your pens ready? I want to see who can come up with 28. Starting now.
Proper discussion in I think it's recommended that you not be silent when you are eating. Speak in a proper manner. One third.
That's 1 minute up. Right, you've got 30 seconds left to see who's got 28 or more. They're not doing so well today, they only got 10. 20 seconds left.
What do you think about eating together?
10 seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Finished. Fin? Okay. Right, who's got 12 or more?
The spiritual group.
The spiritualists, how many have you got? 11. Right. Apparently 11 is less than 12. I mean, certainly in English it is.
Only one short.
All right. Okay, seeing as you've done so well, tell us the 11 you've got.
Halal, food,
Okay, good.
Bismillah,
Say Bismillah.
right hand,
Okay,
use 3 fingers,
okay,
start with the food in front of you,
good.
don't tap, don't start before others,
Okay.
eat slowly, Sunnah Ibrahimi, chew properly,
Sunnah Ibrahimi, what does that mean?
feed others,
Okay, feed others.
I hope that's use 3 fingers.
Okay. You use 3 fingers twice.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, there's some spiritual influence there. Okay. All right. Okay. Right, can you add something to this that's missing?
Oh wait, we put Bismillah, eat on the right hand. With the right
Okay,
hand.
just anything they've not
Close
said.
your mouth.
Close your mouth, don't eat with... Okay.
Eat small mouthfuls. Eat slowly. Don't eat in a hurry. Don't overeat.
Okay.
Put the food to the side if you don't like it.
Yeah, don't complain.
Okay.
It doesn't taste great.
Don't talk
Don't talk.
while eating. While chewing.
Don't talk while chewing. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Because eating over the meal is fine. To speak during because the meal is actually a social event, but not to actually speak when your mouth is full.
It's not from the Sunnah, the opposite. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi
Sallallahu
wasallam said to us, don't eat silent.
Yeah.
Because the other religion before there was like.
Yeah. So it should be it should be in a social event. Okay.
But not like when you have
Okay.
food now.
All right. Excellent. Right, I'm sure we've got loads there, but the time is running out. I want to jump to page 39 in the book. And I think if it's okay, can I just read it to you? This is the reflection section that I'm talking about. This is like this crazy guy from Scotland just thinking. So there are 3 important things that come to mind when I reflect on these lines and my own upbringing. My parents were very English. We were expected to listen carefully to the Queen's speech on Christmas Day. And this is true, by the way. My parents, they had my grandmother. She had a tin which was really special for her, which was for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth, 1952. The Queen was coronated, and she had kept all of her special things in this tin. We were brought up as real English royalists. We followed the Queen, and when the Queen spoke on 3 o'clock on Christmas Day, we sat and listened. And this is how I was brought up. We were taught to heat the teapot before putting in tea leaves, use a knife and fork correctly, and to never leave the table without permission. This is how I was brought up. When you make tea, the correct way to make tea is you have to have a proper porcelain pot. You have to heat the kettle before you heat the pot before you put the tea bags in. Then you put the tea bags in, leave it a couple of minutes, and then you pour the water onto the tea leaves, not tea bags, tea leaves. And then you strain it after 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how strong you want it. And then you add the milk after the milk has gone into the cup. This is how you make tea. All right? But anyway, as I said, I've recovered a little bit, and when I take the tablets, I'm less of a pain to live with, but apparently I'm still difficult. So this is how tea should be made, okay?
No discussion.
No discussion. Some of these very English etiquettes continue to be important. Others have been long forgotten or abandoned. For example, standing for the Queen's speech was one of the first to go. I didn't make any of my kids stand when the Queen spoke. My son is the most anti-royalist Republican you can find. The first two issues relate to the adoption and abandonment of customs and norms that are not directly from the Islamic tradition. All cultures have unwritten rules about eating, particularly in company. So everything to do with eating is crucial to how social interaction takes place. And as the brother has just said, that in the traditions before, they ate in silence. This is not our tradition. Our tradition is eating as a social event. The two issues relate to the... Okay, all cultures have unwritten rules about eating. Politeness at meals is a constant reminder of the need for politeness in all forms of interaction. If you can't behave at the table, you can't behave at all. Often there is a hierarchy implied in the seating. The values of society are strongly expressed through eating. For example, the head of the table. You know, one of the things I like to do when I go to somebody's house is I think, what's going to cause the most difficulty for me to sit? And if they expect me to sit at the head of the table, that's the place I'm not going to sit. Just so it kind of makes everyone feel awkward. That's just my kind of naughtiness. But usually you have a way of sitting. That's how people organise the way. There's a hierarchy. Even the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, they used to talk about the sufra. You know what a sufra is? What's a sufra in English? The Turkish people know what a sufra is. There's no Turkish people. Or Arabs as well.
It's a shared. At the table when everything's finished, when we just sit and eat. Then the table.
Huh? Distakhan. Dastarkhan.
Normally it's a table, it's a cloth.
Tablecloth.
Floor.
Okay.
Normally it's on the floor and you say sofa mainly. And nowadays it has developed to be also the table. Sofa means the clothes.
Oh, okay.
Well, it means you sit on the table.
Ah.
But in olden days, it's
Okay.
cloth and sitting.
Actually,
Some kind of buffet.
in among Arabs, certainly the Arabs that I know, a sufra would never refer to a table.
No,
A sufra would not. It might be in other cultures, but the sufra is something you put on the floor, and it's also something that's not permanent. You put down the sufra. For example, in Hadramaut, the word sufra means a big plate. That's what a sufra means. Hata sufra means bring the plate, and it would be a plate which would be about this big. And in Hadramaut, the sufra is almost a standard size, and it's a size for 4 people to eat at. That's the normal sufra. In other cultures, like in Turkey, the sufra would actually be a tablecloth. And each one of these has a different meaning. The actual word sufra in Arabic, the original meaning of sufra is the leather cloth that you take with you on a journey to eat when you need to picnic, so to speak. So you'll be on a journey, and you get off your camel, you take off the sufra, you throw the sufra on the floor, and then you eat. And then you pick the sufra back, and then on the camel you go. So the sufra is a leather cloth. Now this concept of carrying a sufra with you is as if you're carrying this ability to have a social intercourse between people, which is portable. And if you have ever lived in a place where the cultures are just merging, like I remember living in Jeddah for a while, I used to find these Arabs who'd come out of, they'd live in beautiful furnished apartments with, air conditioning. But when it came to the evening time, they'll go and find some little tiny piece of sand between 2 buildings, or even between, on the motorway, you've got a motorway, and in the middle, you'll find somebody just throws a cloth, and they'll be sitting there, just oblivious to the world, eating dates and drinking coffee. And you think, you drive a Mercedes, you live in a house on the 17th floor and it's even the toilet's air conditioned, and you come out and you sit in the sand on a motorway. You must have some kind of Bedouin blood inside you. But this is what a sufra is it's to do with how people organize their society. So every society has a different way of organizing itself. So here, each community has its different way of dealing with things. And we just mentioned that yesterday. It was really nice. We had a gathering, and then afterwards we had cheese and bread. It was really, really nice. Now, I have friends. I mean, I spend a lot of time in East Africa. And we define food by rice. A meal isn't called a meal if it doesn't have rice. It's not a meal. A meal means rice. You can't. It's just not. It's not. You can't That's not a meal. If it doesn't have rice, why are you giving it to me? It's okay, cheese and bread is fine, but don't call it a meal. Just don't pretend that you're being hospitable. Okay. But apparently in Sweden, that's normal. Is that kind of normal? All right, alhamdulillah. So you can see that this, and I have a Swahili friend who his sister-in-law was a vegetarian, and one day he just got really crazy with it. He says, "Why don't you give me food?" He says, "You've stayed in my house for 3 days. I fed you 3 meals a day." He says, "Yeah, rabbit food!" And he was like really crazy because she gave him loads of lovely food, but none of it had rice. Because it defined the relationship between him and her was by the fact she didn't give him rice. Subhanallah. Anyway, so this is about the values of society strongly expressed through eating. This is why in Islam it is normal for several people to eat from the same plate, implying brotherhood, love and equality. The sufra is really important in Islam. And that's why when I said in Hadramaut it has a standard size, is because you have to find the people to eat with you. You know, the social group is defined by the size of the sufra. And even if you look at how the Arabs used to talk about each other, they said, "Oh, what kind of people were they? They slaughtered 3 camels." You look at some of the seerah, there's times where they said, "How many are they?" And they said, "They slaughtered 10 camels," meaning there's 100 people. And they would define the number of people by the number of camels that are slaughtered. And they would say, "So-and-so, he's a man of 3 camels." And they would define a man by his 3 camels, meaning that when he cooks 3 camels. And then he finds the people to eat them. You know, that's how the Arabs would define themselves. He's a man of 3 camels. And the hadith I've got in mind is a hadith which is known as a hadith Zar'a. The hadith of Zar'a. And everybody who plans to get married should read this hadith. Every husband should read this hadith before they get married. If you're already married, still read it anyway. Sorry?
For the next one.
No, not for the next one. For the one you've got first. Okay. When you've implemented the hadith and she's happy with it, then you can talk to her about the second one. But get this right first, because in that hadith, I'm sorry for sidetracking again, but that hadith talks about these women get together and they sit around a campfire and they start to talk about their husbands. And Sayyidatuna Aisha is telling this story. And then each one of them tells about their husband. And some of them, they are very blunt about what their husbands are like. And others are very, very straightforward. And they say very clear things. And some of them, those that are the happiest with their husbands, actually say the least. And one of them, for example, he says, إِذَا دَخَلَ فَهِدَ وَإِذَا خَرَجَ أَسِدَ. I don't know how you translate. When he comes in, he's a leopard. When he leaves, he's a lion. Okay? And that's all she says. Does anyone know what that means?
Like
Sorry?
like
Right. Do you want the X-rated version or the 12 plus version? I don't know if you have the same ratings in Britain, in Sweden, but films are rated according to the age of suitability. There's an 18 version which is for adults only, and then there's a 12 which is for mature young boys. Sorry? Okay, then I'll give you the shortened. I'll give you the 12 plus version, and then those who want to know the 18 plus version, I'll tell them later. Okay, a leopard has 2 qualities. The Arabs consider leopards to have 2 qualities. One is that they pounce, they jump, and the other is that they sleep. And I don't know how this works, but in Arabic you say, "Huwa anma min al-fahd." He sleeps more than a leopard. I have no idea why they say that, but it's an Arab phrase. It means that they just fall asleep. And what this means is that when he came into the house, he just falls asleep. And she says this as a positive thing. What does it mean? He can relax when he comes home. She makes him feel relaxed. And he has built a relationship where he can just come in the house and fall asleep on the sofa. And that's one of the 2 qualities that the lion has, the leopard has.
She can't interact with him.
She can.
She doesn't have to.
She doesn't have to. If he's tired, he doesn't have. But also, the first one is that he pounces, means that he's playful. When he comes in, he just comes in with a bang, and he just wants to play. He just wants to play with his wife, and that's what when he comes in, he's like a leopard. Means he just wants to come in and play with me. And when the commentators describe this, they say this is what Umar ibn al-Khattab was like. They say this is the quality of Umar ibn al-Khattab. When he came into the house, he was like a child. He used to come and he used to play with the children. And he used to play with his wife. But most men, they don't think that playing with their wife or playing with their children is macho. This isn't what Muslim men are like. They don't play with their wives. They don't play with their children. But they should. If they understand this part of the hadith. Where they're kharaja asida. But when they go out, they're like lions. They've played with their wives, they don't need to play anymore. Why? Because anybody that comes in their way, they have a different kind of persona. They have a different way of dealing. Whereas now, Muslim men are the opposite. When they come in, you call that food? How much salt do you put in my food? Why is the bread stale? And then when they go to the secretary, oh, don't worry about it. It's okay to flirt with your secretary, This is what we do at work. This is the Swedish way of doing things. This is sunnah. Only a single guy can talk like that.
I said sunnah of Sweden.
Okay. Unless a Dane speaking. But this is one of the qualities that Umar ibn Khattab was not like that in any way. When we think of Umar ibn Khattab, we think of a man with a sword. We think of a man. You know the story when somebody upsets the Prophet ﷺ, and he turns to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, "Bisayfi hada ya Rasulullah." I mean, this is just typical of Umar ibn Khattab. Bisayfi hada ya Rasulullah. Can you just imagine this man? Should I kill him? I mean, it sounds so Scottish. Should I do him? Should I do him, ya Rasulullah? I mean, it translates beautifully into Scottish. It doesn't translate into English. By the sword, shall I deal with him? Should I do him? So this is what it's referring. When he's outside, he was like that. But when he was inside, he was totally different. That's what Umar ibn Khattab used to be like a child with his children. And when there was a story where there was a guy who the guy used to his wife used to tatawalat alay. He used to tatawalat means she used to like tower over him, literally. She just used to nag him and give him a hard time and just go on with him. She just gave him a hard time. So this guy was just tired of his missus, I just can't take this anymore. I come home and she's just like, what's she like? I'm gonna divorce this one. I just can't take it anymore. But before I do this, let me just go and see Umar ibn al-Khattab. He's the Khalifa. Maybe he can give some kind of fatwa or something. I don't know. I mean, he's in charge of the country. Surely he can do something about it. So he comes and he hears Umar ibn al-Khattab's wife talking to him. And this is Umar ibn al-Khattab. Bisayfi hada ya Rasulullah. He walks down a street. Where does Shaitan go? He takes a different road just to avoid. Shaitan runs from the shadow of Umar ibn al-Khattab. And he comes and he hears this woman, the wife of Umar ibn al-Khattab, talking to Umar ibn al-Khattab. And he thinks he had problems. He hears how she was speaking to him and he thinks, he is the Khalifa. He is the most powerful man in Islam. He represents the Prophet ﷺ. And he's putting up with this. So he goes home and he thinks his wife is lovely. The next day or a couple of days later, he goes to Umar ibn Khattab and he says, this happened to me. And I came to you and I was shocked. And he says, my wife, she's lovely. She cooks and she doesn't have to. Oops. I could get into trouble for saying that. I usually do because
you can see a lot of wings here to some
yeah,
of the audience.
yeah. Some of the women seem to be smart because legally, she's not obliged to cook for him. What do you mean, astaghfirullah? So it's not. It's not an obligation for her to cook. It's the Sharia says it's not an obligation. She cleans my clothes, and it's not an obligation. She doesn't have to, and she protects my chastity. That's an obligation. And so, what else have I got to complain about? So in the house, he knows his priorities, and in the house, he was the kind of person that was able to play with his family. He played with his children, he played with his wife, and he fell asleep on the sofa. And that's what a husband, one of the qualities. So what was I? So one of the people, he said, her husband, his name is Malik. He says, "Can I tell you what Malik is like? He used to slaughter 10 camels." And that's it. She just said, "Can I tell you what Malik was like? He used to slaughter 10 camels." And then goes on to the next person. And this idea of slaughtering camels is that he slaughtered the camels, then he went to look for the people to eat. That's what he was like. And he says, "That was my husband." So she's like proud, "That's my husband. He used to slaughter camels and then find the people." So eating is a really important part of the deen. So this is why in Islam, in normal, it's for several people to eat the same plate, implying brotherhood, love, equality. In some cultures, burping within reason at a meal is considered a sign of enjoyment of the meal within reason and a compliment to the cook. I first came across this, as you can see, I didn't grow up in this kind of culture. If you burped at the table, this would, I just can't even think of it. But in some cultures, that's if the lady who's cooked the food hears lots of burping, she's thinking, "Yeah, they like my food." And when in this kind of culture, where a woman thinks that they like my food, you can see this is like a big thing. So, in other cultures, it's considered rude, like mine. My question: how do we, as a multicultural community, develop table manners that are consistent with Islamic principles but respect each other's cultures? If the sufra means this to one person, it means that to another person. And as you can see, I'm kind of grew up as a very English, conservative guy with OCD. I mean, how can I live in Hadramaut? Or Pakistan? I mean, I've got to go to Pakistan in April, and I'm so scared of what it's going to be like. Is it really, do I need to worry? It's going to be all right?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. After April, I'm going to come back and I'm going to find out. I'm going to tell you what happened.
You just need to make sure you come back.
Sorry?
You just need to make sure that you come back. Other things are fine.
Let's come back.
He's just worrying me even more. Why am I not coming back? Okay, no, let's not talk anymore because I'm getting a bit paranoid. Okay. So we need to develop this kind of qualities. And in a community like this, how do we deal with eating? I mean, what are you going to do if one of my Swahili friends come along and I bring them to your gathering and you give them cheese and bread? How am I going to get this over to them? Actually, they're just Swedish. Don't worry about it. They're not really that rude. So we need to develop that. The second issue is directly related to the first. The concept of urf, social custom, has a special role in Islamic codes of ethics and is at the heart of the question above. Urf is a term used for a custom that people practice voluntarily from an unbroken tradition going back many years or centuries and which does not contradict the principle of Islamic belief and practice. The Messenger was commanded, خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Hold to forgiveness, command what is right, al-urf, but turn away from the ignorance. So here, the concept of urf is important in developing a culture. Al-Qurtubi says the word urf and ma'ruf both mean good habit with which the intellect is content and the soul is satisfied. So the concept of urf is something which is a habit that a community has, like eating cheese and bread, which the heart feels at peace with. Alhamdulillah, yesterday I came and that was really nice. Why? Because it was good quality cheese and it was good quality bread. You know, I like bread if it's nice. And I like coffee if it's nice. I don't like coffee if it's not nice. I'm sorry. I can't drink coffee that's not good quality. There's certain things about me. I'm really sorry. If you give me rubbish coffee, I will probably drink it, but you'll see on my face I can't cope with it. Honey, if I'm going to buy honey, I'd rather not have honey unless it's top quality. Okay, I don't like cheap honey. And perfume. I don't like, cheap and nasty. It doesn't have to be strong. It just has to be good. And this is actually a principle within Sharia. If you're going to have perfume, you should have good perfume. Because the Prophet, when it comes to fiqh, and I have to apologize because I only know the Shafi principles. But if a woman complains to the qadi, to the judge, about her husband wasting money on perfume, he can ask her the man, what amount do you spend on perfume? So if you have 10,000 krone a month as your salary, and you spend 6,000 krone on the, life, house, and food and things, 6,600 on that, and you spend 3,300 on perfume, he will not consider you to be a zalim, to be a wrongdoer. In Shafi fiqh, that is okay. To spend 1/3 of your income on perfume is not considered to be israf. That's how important perfume is in our culture. Don't give me cheap perfume. If we're going to have perfume, let's have good stuff. Otherwise, don't use perfume. So, I kind of exposed half of my faults here in this one lesson. So, it needs to be satisfied. And that cheese and that bread is cool. My heart is at peace with that. That's something I can accept. If that's how people do it in Gothenburg, I reckon we could live here. Yeah, I think we could live here. Yeah, sounds all right. And we'll see what happens in Pakistan in April. All right? Because I do like good cheese and bread. And I'm not quite sure that we're going to get good cheese and bread in Pakistan.
Cheese is like in Urdu, cheese is things. So you will get good things.
I get good things, but not good cheese. Will I get good perfume?
Perfume, you need to look for. I don't know much about Pakistan, but you can get good ones. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I need to. That's why I might not be coming back. Huh? The perfume might kill me. Okay. All right. That's the second point, and I want you to look at your. So here we have the concept of urf. It's a custom which people have, and I'm giving that as an example of that cheese and bread after a gathering. That's how people would socialise, and it's a good custom. I like rice, but in Swahili culture, you never visit somebody after dhuhr unless you've been invited. You don't visit people at that time because that's the time that people eat, and it's just wrong. You just don't turn up. You don't pray dhuhr and turn up at somebody's house unless you're really close to them or you've been invited. Why? Because that's the time they eat rice. In the evening, they don't eat rice, so you can turn up in the evening. So you can come after Isha, you can visit people. Why? Because you're not going to get a meal. You're probably going to get bread and cheese. Or bread and eggs. All right? So this is a custom there that you just need to get used to. In Swahili culture, this has been going on for hundreds of years. This is just how it is. It's not going to change. No matter how many Swedish people move to Mombasa, it will not change. They will not turn into cheese-eating Swedes. Okay? They do have nice coffee, though. All right, and good perfume. Okay, so I could live there. They're the customs that I could get used to. I don't think so. Here we need to think about customs. What customs, what urf, would you want your children, the next generation, to be adopting and not adopting from Swedish culture? Now that's a big, crucial part, not just to do with food, because I'm kind of talking about, but just in a more general sense. What parts of Swedish culture do you think are, this is what my kid should understand? And what parts of Swedish culture shouldn't you? The exercise that I want to give you to do very, very briefly is on the next one, page 2, activity 5. Applying the concept of urf. I want you to just look down the list of things and then tick. This should be considered urf. This is something that I think our kids should have. Oh, no way. This is out. It's not Islamic. Just look through those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things, and I'll give you 2 minutes to do it. Okay, that's a minute up.
The 6th of January thing is
All right, time up. Right, time up. Who thinks trick or treat should be considered urf? Who's going to let their kids do trick or treating? Trick or treat? You don't know trick or treat? Alhamdulillah, it's not common here in Sweden yet. Okay, what is it? Explain.
Going around demanding sweets or threatening to.
It's a Christian holiday. It's Day of the Dead.
Okay, it's a Christian.
Day of the Dead.
The Day of the Dead. Halloween is the 31st of October, which is the day after All Saints' Day, which is the 30th of October. So in that sense, All Saints' Day is followed by Hallowed Day, which is the Halloween, which is the third. But that has nothing to do with trick or treat. That's just by coincidence, so to speak, that there is a religious date which nobody knows about. If somebody comes to trick or treat in your house, by the way, do you know today's All Saints' Day? And why do they call it All Saints' Day? Is because there's more than 365 Catholic saints. So how are you going to get the new saints to have a day? So what you do is you have one day which is for all saints. So all of the new saints are counted on that day. So that's kind of a religious day, but it's not got customs associated with it. But this kind of trick or treating is related to that because there became a day which was the day of the ghosts and kind of grew up from this. But this whole trick or treating thing is quite new. If you go back 30, 40 years, it wasn't even in, well, maybe 50 years in America, it wasn't even there. Interestingly, in Scotland, they did used to have a similar sort of thing about 100 years ago in the west of Scotland, which was called guising. And boys and girls used to go guising around the town on this particular day. So guising is like 100 years old in the west of Scotland, and trick-or-treating is just under 100 years old. It's not really that old.
Does it have to be old to be old?
Urf has to be something which has been established for a long time. It can't just be a custom which you just picked up now. It can't be just something that's Urf is something which is established over time. And if you come to a community which has an established principle for a long time, then this has some respect within Sharia. But this isn't Urf. And on top of that, it's a pretty, I mean, you described it perfectly. It's where kids go to people's houses and demand sweets or threaten them with vandalism. That doesn't kind of sound very Islamic to me. It sounds like, pure terrorism, actually. So that's not Islamic in any way. And anyone that puts that as being urf, I would disagree. I usually kind of not judgmental, but I would say that's not cool. All right. The next one, eating gingerbread men in late December. A very Norwegian thing. Swedish as well?
Yeah.
All right. So I could do that. I could cope with. The only problem, I have a slight problem with the gingerbread men, the men. Is that kind of, I just feel kind of guilty biting off somebody's head. Is that me, or is there something? You get over it.
You have pigs as well.
No, pigs is worse.
Pigs is more suitable. Actually, I would probably have less problem eating a gingerbread figure of a pig than I would of a guy. Something about me. Eating somebody's, it just doesn't sit nicely with me.
Halal, so that's a good thing.
This pig is halal. It's made of gingerbread. So who ticks that as urf? As far as I know, it goes back hundreds of years in this part of the world, and it's got nothing to do with religion in such, because it's not fixed to a particular date. It's actually just something that really tastes good on a cold evening. It's just really nice. So I'm okay with that. I think I'll let my kids eat gingerbread. Eating strawberries and cream while watching tennis being played at Wimbledon. Now this...
Why not?
It's very costly because it's long queue and then.
You know, if you have tea which is made correctly, there is only one thing which is better than Earl Grey tea, which is cooked, which is made perfectly, is strawberries and cream while watching Wimbledon. You know, Moroccan tea is a whole different story. You know, we're talking about something totally different. Alhamdulillah, this is definitely urf. Okay.
For me, without Wimbledon, it's fine.
Without Wimbledon? How can you eat strawberries and cream without Wimbledon? What's the matter with these Philistines? And he's supposed to be Indian. The Indians are supposed to adopt our culture. You know, we gave you everything.
No, we take, cricket instead of...
Of course, cricket.
Yeah,
No.
cricket,
No, how can you... Oh my God, what kind of Indian is he? You eat cucumber sandwiches with cricket? What? Okay, let me calm down. Calm down. Right. As you can see, the English are a bit extreme. You can't eat strawberries and cream at a cricket match. You eat cucumber sandwiches. Sorry. Right, let me go back to... Calm down.
So that's a good food, I take it.
What gives you the impression that I... Is there any indication that this is important to...
Not at all.
No, not at all. All right. Yeah, I think if you come to England, you can't watch Wimbledon without strawberries and cream. And you have to pay. Because if you go to any shop during the Wimbledon weekend, strawberries and cream cost 10 times as much as any other week. But they taste 10 times as good, apparently. Okay. So, I'm not even going to ask who agrees with me that this is urf. Right, because I didn't take my tablets this morning, as you probably can see. Right, but seriously, is that urf?
Wimbledon's old.
No, it's not that old.
It's not that old. And I think you can eat cucumber sandwiches. And I think you can eat strawberries and cream at cricket. But I wouldn't eat it at an India match.
And also, you don't have to camp outside, to watch. For, whole night you camp for the Wimbledon.
Depends if Andy Murray's playing.
Yeah.
If Andy Murray's playing, then you can camp all night. Oh. Okay. Sorry.
Sheikh, I'm a bit confused. Like, if for instance, for Earth to be, old, there was a time where it wasn't old.
Okay.
So, do you understand? Like,
It wasn't urf then. It became urf afterwards.
Yeah, according to.
According to this definition, yeah. According to one of the definitions, according to Al-Qurtubi, the time isn't important. It's the fact that intellectually and in terms of the heart, it feels right. So when you go to a place that you've never been to before, you go to Eastern Turkey, for example, and they present you with Uzbekistan. You go to Uzbekistan and they give you tea with salt in it. There's a tribe of Uzbeks who have tea with salt in it. It sounds disgusting, but it tastes really good. It's amazing. When they told me, you've seen how kind of crazy I am. I went to these people in Australia, and they came from this tribe, and they told me we're going to have tea with salt. My heart started to, I almost had a heart attack just thinking about it.
It's almost shark.
It's like, my mother would turn in her grave. But it tasted really good. I will never try it again. The reason why is because I think only that family could make tea like that. And I don't trust anybody else to make tea. But when I go to that family in Australia, one of the things I'll be asking for is for them to make me tea. Because my mind and my heart is completely at peace with it. That's a good custom.
So it's like, as long as it tastes good, it's fine.
No, I think... No. Al-Qurtubi is actually quite specific. He says as long as the intellect and the heart are at peace with it. So if the heart and because it might taste fine but just feel really awkward. But this is good tea. This is how it should be.
No, but isn't it like if it doesn't have any religious affiliation?
Yeah. Urf cannot be something which contradicts the Sharia, even if it's long, well established. Like, dancing around trees naked and then jumping in the river. Which apparently is apparently what I've heard Finnish people do. This is kind of not cool. All right, this is this Buddhist stuff. No.
That's Arab.
Arab. There's Arab, not Urf.
No, but how about the Christmas tree? I mean, that's not religious. For dancing on the Christmas tree, that's not Urf, right?
No, dancing around Christmas trees is not Urf.
But it's not religious.
Even the Christmas tree has a significance which is contrary to Islamic custom and culture. It's because it has a significance which is from a Jahil custom, and even within Christianity, it's not Urf. It's not Urf within Christianity. There are things which are within Christianity are Urf, which have become acceptable within Christianity, which are giving of gifts, for example, which people can associate with the story as understood in the Christian tradition from the Nativity, which giving of gifts was associated with the birth of Jesus. So therefore the giving of gifts is an Urf, which is Urf in a Christian community. Now, whether we can adopt that as an Urf within our children's is a really good example. Anyone got any thoughts on that?
In India, we were taking gifts.
You like to take gifts?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't eat strawberries and cream, and you take people's gifts. Okay. I'm struggling with this. Right.
What if the custom loses its religious value? Like the Christmas tree?
The Christmas tree.
It hasn't really got the pagan.
It doesn't have pagan. It has pagan roots.
But it doesn't have any affiliation anymore, really, does it?
So is it Urf then?
People have been doing it for a long time.
What will be the answer if a kid ask you, my kid in the school, they have this Christmas tree, or can we have it? Why not?
I would explain. Personally, I would not consider the Christmas tree to be Urf. This is my personal opinion, is I don't think the Christmas tree is Urf because it doesn't have a long-standing tradition in any culture other than the Greek pagan culture, which goes back a few hundred years. But even in Greek pagan culture, they don't have Christmas trees anymore. So it's not even got that. So that it's a symbol which has taken on a new significance. And I don't think that new significance has got any relevance to the culture that my children are growing up, whether it's in Denmark or whether it's in Scotland. I don't see any relevance to my child. So therefore, as the children ask me, can we have a Christmas tree? I'll say no. And I will explain why that we can't have a Christmas tree, because there's no significance to this. There are other elements of Christmas which they will see that I do consider Urf, which is giving gifts. For example, the area where I used to live, and everybody would give gifts to each other. It's quite normal for everybody in the street to share gifts. In the same way, when it came to Eid, several of the families would give gifts to the Muslim families. And it was quite normal for people to recognize the people's religious days and significant days by the giving of gifts. So therefore, this is an Urf. The giving of gifts is something which goes back many centuries, is associated with particular religious and social events, and is consistent with our culture, which is where the Prophet ﷺ talks about giving gifts and increasing people's love. So therefore, we will give Christmas gifts. And we will receive Christmas gifts. We will receive Christmas gifts from people who recognise that we don't drink, because they know we're Muslim. And so what they give us would never be whiskey. They won't give alcohol because they know we're Muslim. But I will accept a gift because I know that they wouldn't be giving. So it's not that. So this one aspect, this is perfectly acceptable. But this thing, I don't think we need a Christmas tree. I don't think we need a Christmas tree. What about Christmas cards? So each one of these things you need to tackle individually. And that's why the concept of Urf is important for you to understand when you talk about how you bring up your kids. Because if you don't know what Urf is, then you can't apply it in the tarbiyah of your own children. or your own self. You know, what can I do and what can't I do? Because the whole question of, is it urf? I mean, there has been for many generations the tradition of going out on a Friday night and getting completely drunk and falling over in the street. This is a very Scottish thing to do. You're rejecting that one. Yeah, I think that's not too cool. Yeah, it's not nice as well. You know, just forget the Islamic principles. It's just not nice. You know, it's just not a nice thing to do. But so, how to deal with this is, what about when people invite you out on a Friday night? How do you respond? If you don't understand what urf is, then you won't know what you can and you can't do in relationships with people you're working with. Because I can't do that. You know, I'm not going to go out with you. Perhaps I'll go out with you on this occasion to this place, because now you're setting boundaries about what is acceptable and not within the customs of that particular community. If we could just shoot through the rest. So distributing on presents on the 6th of January. Why don't you agree with this?
No, I didn't. I said no.
Why do you say no, it's not fine?
Because I think it had some connection with Christianity.
Yeah, it does.
Like Orthodox.
In Andalusia, the 6th of January is associated with a particular saint in which the gifts are given. They mark the 24th of Christmas, the 24th of December, but they don't give gifts. The gifts are always given on the 6th of January. And that's, yeah, it's a religious, it has religious roots. But in Andalusia, they don't really care. It's just, this is how Andalusians do it. So I don't know whether that's urf or not.
But it's a public holiday in Sweden as well.
6th of January. Is it?
That's when you start the Christmas tree in Sweden.
The 6th?
13 days after Christmas.
Okay, the 6th of December, 6th of January is 13 days. Right, so it has some significance here also.
We're off this week.
3 witnesses came to Jesus.
That's not Boxing Day, it's a Boxing Day.
Okay. But okay, do you think it's, I mean, it's your decision. I mean, if you've got kids, you have to decide. If you happen to live in Andalusia, you might look very different by not marking this date. So you have to decide, is it urf that I can accept, or is it something I'm rejecting? But that's something each family, pizza night, people don't cook on Friday nights in Glasgow, by the way. It's just quite normal that you eat takeaways. There's some families eat takeaways all the time, but you know, it seems that most of my Scottish friends are really lazy, and they don't cook on a Friday night. It's all right? Sarah, cooking on Friday nights? She's cooking. Good.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? I have a thought. Maybe a lot of parents have it too. In Swedish schools, they have a tradition in the school. They've had it for many, many, many years. And although the children and the parents are not religious necessarily, but they have a tradition to celebrate Lucia. And they tell you that's not religious, it's just a custom. And then they go to church and they say, well, the children a lot of them are atheists, and their parents are atheists, but still they go to church. And then singing hymn is also tradition. And so if you have a Muslim child, you must have the boundaries, because I, for example, have, what is their tradition? Although my husband is a Swedish man, what is their tradition? It's not my tradition. So I have to show them that although I respect your own values and tradition, but my child can't sing the hymn. And if you teach a child how to understand where they live, because we sometimes live in Sweden, but we live somewhere else. We are not here. We live in segregated areas, and we have no clue how the kids have it in school. I mean, I had to fight with a music teacher because he wants my child to sing the hymn because it's the school's tradition. And I had to talk to him, and I spoke to him in English, and I explained to him this, I don't accept it. But he didn't take it from me, but when he understood that my husband is a Swedish man, he doesn't accept it as a Swedish man because he's a Muslim, then he backs off. So it's not that easy for us who are living in Sweden, because a lot of us immigrants who come here to Sweden, and it's easier if you're born here, of an immigrant background, that you must understand also your boundaries, and that's not easy. And that comes to the same problem as Eid. He says a lot of kids would love to have Christmas. A lot of Muslim kids would love to have Christmas present, tree with presents. And questions asked why. Do you make such an effort when they have Eid than Christmas? Or do you think Eid is so boring that the kids look forward to see Christmas? So it's
yeah. I think these are all like the consequences of understanding urf. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that what the point here in to do with eating is there are customs related to eating, like what there are customs related to everything. And you need to understand the difference between custom and a good custom and good traditions that can be incorporated into our tarbiyah and are accepted, and those which are not. And that what you've kind of summarized is that there have to be boundaries. And that's what we need to do with understanding urf. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to think through this. And there are many examples we can do. So I think at that point, perhaps we should set the boundary and call for the salah, inshallah. Is that right? And then when we come back, I think I have 4 questions, plus one point that I'd like to put to people. The point that I'd like to put to people was, we're all kind of connected to one organization. And I'd like to think, okay, now we've got a book, we've got some ideas, but there's a lot of material that we haven't covered. There's a tiny bit of material we have covered, and you can probably see there's a lot more discussion that could be developed from this. I'd like you to think in the next session is what would be the next step in practicalities of what you would want to do to develop the structure or the organization, the group, the community around this concept of tarbiyah. What would be the next step? Would it be, for example, we came back, we went through the rest of the book. Would it be that maybe we focus on particular issues within the school? Maybe we develop some training in specific ways about parts of the school which you think need some help. So that's one of the things I like to throw up, and then also to tackle these 4 questions, inshallah, when we come back after Salah.